Hello and welcome back to the Footy Frontline podcast brought to you by My Betting Mate. My name is D'Urbano and I'm joined here by Oliver Caffrey to look at all the big headlines from round 16 and look ahead to round 17. Ollie, another big weekend, plenty of talking points to emerge from it. Unfortunately though, it seems like we're circling back to something we probably don't necessarily want to spend too much time on, but again, umpiring is dominating all the discourse coming out of the last round.
It sure is, yeah. It really came to a head on Saturday night in the Essendon Geelong game. The Bombers fans were absolutely filthy in that third quarter. Definitely game-turning. Brad Scott called it an unfortunate series of events that went against the Bombers and, yeah, some really dodgy free kicks. And they weren't paid at times as well. And, yeah, Brad Scott, he worded it really carefully post-game. I was there in the press conference. I asked him if he would chase it up with the league, but he didn't have to. The AFL actually approached him, and I think they had about a 3-hour conversation on Monday after it all went down. And, yeah, he was okay with it. He knew mistakes were made. There was the deliberate rush behind. Paid against Jai Menzie. That was really game-turning, that decision. So it's just a weekly thing now. And the AFL have started going away. Every week, they're on their own media platform. They were getting not so much Andrew Dillon, but Laura Kane and the umpire's boss, Steve McBurney. They were sitting down with one of the reporters on AFL media and detailing the decisions on the weekend and what went right, what went wrong. But they've decided to scrap that this week and doesn't look like they're going to do it for the rest of the season. So, yeah, some just mixed messages coming out of HQ, and I think people are just a bit confused. They're just not following through with things enough. I think if you start something, you probably should follow it through. And yeah, there was nothing communicated publicly to the general public this week after arguably that was probably the worst umpired quarter of the season. Just the amount of decisions that affected the game. So yeah, it's weird. Like they'll come out and explain one crucial decision at the end of a game, which they did a few weeks ago in that North Melbourne Collingwood game, the Essendon Adelaide game early in the season. There's been numerous examples this season where, there's been a crucial decision paid late and they've come out and explained it, but then if it's the third quarter, they're not going to. So yeah, it's a really tough one. And yeah, Andrew Dillon came out during the week and was asked about it at a press conference. They were over in Adelaide to announce the dates for Gather Round next year. And yeah, he was obviously asked about the umpiring. He said it's as good as he's ever seen it, which is, I don't think anyone can agree with that. Just admit that there's fault. Like, he didn't have to slam the umpires or anything. He's just going into bat for them and trying to get behind them. But you can't say it's as good as it's ever been. There's 4 umpires. They've obviously taken time to adjust to that new system. So, yeah, it's never going to be perfect. No league in the world has perfect officiating. You go to any league in the world, NBA, EPL, NFL, there's always going to be controversy around umpiring and officiating. So it's never going to be perfect. But I think, just a lot of events have led up to this, and you can just feel the fan fury at the moment just with the umpiring. And they just need something to take the spotlight away from the umpiring. We're having a really close season, but it just seems every week the focus is on umpiring, and it's just pit over it, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that has also come back to the confusion around the interpretation of holding the ball. I mean, they changed the interpretation a few weeks ago and, explained that, and that's also created a little bit of controversy. It's just been it becomes tiresome, as you mentioned. Like, we shouldn't be talking about the umpiring every single week. We should be talking about the fact that, there's only a handful of points separating about 9 or 10 teams at the moment. Yeah. It's looking like one of the closest finals races that we've seen in a very long time. I mean, anyone can beat anyone on any given week, it seems like, at the moment. So I think that, it's disappointing, and hopefully in these last sort of few weeks of the season, we can start to move forward from this. What did you make of the deliberate rush behind the decision, by the way? I mean, I was also there as a punter and looking on and seeing, the decision in the moment. It looked like, when you looked at it first glance, it was like, okay, I understand why that was paid, because he clearly sort of detoured to step over the line when he could have cleared it. But by the actual interpretation of the rule, it should have been just a behind because of the whole thing about players being within that sort of vicinity. Yeah. What did you make of it, I guess, seeing it in the moment?
In the moment, I thought it was a pretty harsh decision, and the AFL have come out and told Brad Scott that it was a mistake. So we can go from there that it is going to be not paid in the future. But at the time, he did run a long way. He did seem to be under pressure, Dry Menzies, but he did run a long way back towards goal. And I think that did come about because during the second quarter, he flicked the ball back into play near the goal line, and Geelong ended up scoring from that. So I think he actually copped a bit of a bake at halftime and just said, don't do that again. You can't be doing that. Just rush it through. So he did, and then gets pinged anyway. So, yeah, it was really harsh, and it came about like minutes after Sam Draper was taken out, arms chopped by Zach Tui right in front of goal, 30 metres out. You would have thought he would have put it through, and the Bombers would have been up by, I think they would have got back in front, but then take it down the other end, Geelong score through Gary Rowe, and then that free kick gets paid against them, and Geelong go on and win the rest of the game. So, yeah, it was a really harsh moment in the game, and, yeah, obviously it is not a free kick, but, yeah, there's just so much confusion at the moment. Fans, commentators. The AFL just needs to really come out strong and just clarify these things and not let it boil over, because at the moment there's just too much mixed messaging.
Absolutely. Well, let's have a look at actually the proper football because, I mean, we've looked a lot at the umpiring. Let's actually focus on the game. It's some of the games itself. But first and foremost, Sydney and Carlton at the moment are starting to emerge as the two flag favourites. I mean, Sydney for this entire year have been the front runner, but Carlton have now started to join them. I mean, Sydney lost for only the second time this year against Fremantle by only a point. It was a heartbreaking defeat for them. Carlton, they came over with a big win against Richmond as we all expected. But the gap is now at 8 points. These two teams are looking like the two sides who are going to be there at the pointy end of the season. I mean, who's the flag favourite? Who's looking in the best shape going into the final couple months of the regular season?
I still think Sydney. They played really poorly on the weekend against Fremantle. The Dockers were excellent. They threw everything at them and only ended up winning by a point. And the Swans could have drew it or pinched the game with that Logan McDonald shot after the siren, didn't make the distance, and the Dockers hang on for a win. But yeah, the Swans were rubbish in that first half. Came hard late, but it wasn't enough. And yeah, they were going to lose at some stage. They weren't going to go through the rest of the season, be 22-1 and go into the finals. They were going to lose at some stage. So the Dockers have a decent record at the SCG. On the road in recent times have pulled off some big victories. You go back to 2022, Melbourne were undefeated. They were 10-0 going to the MCG, and the Dockers knocked them off that day. So they can pull off some pretty big upsets when they're really on the Dockers. So that's not going to do anything for the Swans. Like, if they played really badly and everything seemed to be out of shape and the Dockers just touched them up, it was a 10-goal win, you would have thought, okay, like, what's going on here? But, yeah, I don't think... I've seen John Longmire very flat and devastated after presses before when they've played poorly, but he was definitely not that after the game on Saturday, just watching back the press conference. I think the Swans were probably like, okay, 1-10 in a row. We're going to lose at some point. It's probably not the worst thing in the world. We played poorly, got beaten by the better team on the day, fixed a few things up, and it's not a bad thing for them at all. And yeah, Carlton are playing some really good footy. They've won their last two games by 10 goals plus. Just did what they had to do against Richmond, though. Like, a lot of teams have bullied up on Richmond this season, so I don't think you can take too much out of that. But their midfield is just so good. I think it's the best performing midfield in the competition right now. Patrick Cripps, he's in better form than he was in 2022 when he won the Brownlow medal. Sam Walsh is over those back issues, it seems. He's playing tremendous footy, and yeah, it makes life a lot easier when you have the midfield just firing all cylinders like they are. So I think Sydney still deserve to be flag favourites, but Carlton are putting together a nice case. But I'd like to see how the Blues go in the next... Yeah, they've got a pretty reasonable draw, but Collingwood, the MCG, later in the season, that's going to be a real test because they were beaten early in the season. Nick Dacos came through with the goods in the last minute, and Collingwood's had a pretty good record over them in recent times, so that's going to be a huge test for them. But yeah, they should finish top two now, the Blues. It'll be the first time since 2000 they've actually finished the season in the top four, and that's going to set them up beautifully. And yeah, as we know, Victorian teams playing against the non-Victorian team on grand final day, that does swing things probably in the Blues' favour. But I think Sydney are the better team. better all-rounded team. Still some questions on Carlton's defence, I think. Their midfield, as I mentioned, terrific. Their forward line, they've got the two spearheads and they're going to win you a lot of games. But, yeah, I think the defence may be a bit sus, so I think Sydney for mine.
I think so as well, simply because you look at Sydney's next 2 games, they're really going to, you think, bounce back in a big way as well. Like, that's not going to be the barometer of their finals credentials, but, you know, looking at their entire case study of this year, they've had a clean bill of health this entire year. Knock on wood that, you know, things don't turn around next few sort of weeks. They've still got players to come back.
Callum Mills, captain.
Callum Mills. They can throw Luke Parker in there as well when he's back from suspension. They've just got an absolute array of talent all across the field. And, you know, you look at their run home, they've got some tricky games in there. I mean, Brisbane at the Gabba, they have to play the Pies at the SCG. You know, even playing against the Bombers at Marvel, they always seem to play a good game against Essendon. It's always a tough one. Port Adelaide in that run too. But Carlton's got it's got some, you know, real games that will probably test their mettle. I mean, even this weekend against GWS, as much as GWS has been out of form, they have to respond. And it's on the road. Yeah, absolutely. The Bulldogs at Marvel isn't a walkover anymore. You know, the Bulldogs have been in much better form recently. Port Adelaide hit and miss, but at times I think Carlton would win that at Marvel. But Collingwood, Hawthorn now, you know, suddenly, So, you know, there's some real tough games in there. And if they can get through that, then I think that really will solidify their credentials because to Richmond's credit, they stuck with them for about 2.5 quarters. But to Carlton's credit, conversely, they blew them out of the water in 5 minutes. Like they just, when they flex, they flex. And that was without Charlie Curnow really even laying a glove on that Richmond team. So it's going to be an interesting one because you do get a sense that the way things are at, how there's such a logjam of teams from third all the way down that Sydney and Carlton are starting to get that separation. If they can lock in a top 2 spot, they're laughing, all the way to the bank. So, you know, we'll see what happens in the weeks ahead. But I think that maintaining the form for Carlton now is going to be so important, maintaining the rage because these next 2 weeks, I think, are really going to be the real barometer tests against 2 teams that are probably going to be desperate as well. I mean, they're battling every game so important for them. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens in the fortnight ahead. But let's start to have a look ahead to round 17. It all kicks off on Friday night. It's a big one. Friday night blockbuster at the MCG. Collingwood versus Essendon. Both teams coming off a loss. The Pies, they almost did it again. They almost came from the clouds to beat the Suns, but fell just short. It prompted a few questions. I mean, Jonathan Brown asking if they lost their aura a little bit. The Bombers, they were in it for the first half against Geelong, but got blown out in the second half. We spoke about all the umpiring sort of controversy around it, but Geelong was simply too good after half-time against the Bombers. These 2 teams already played in a draw once this year on Anzac Day. It shapes up as a massive contest in front of what's going to be a huge crowd on Friday night.
Oh, it's going to be a massive game, this one. Collingwood really need to bounce back after losing against Gold Coast last week. And like you said, they almost pinched it again, but it was almost a shock that they didn't. They got in front. And then Gold Coast kicked the last 2 goals of the game and won it. It was just like, you saw it coming. You thought, okay, we've seen this 20 times in the last 2 seasons. Collingwood will come back in the last quarter and pinch one. And you thought, the Suns are absolutely no chance. And to the Suns' credit, they were really good to be able to overcome that and win the game. But, Collingwood still have a few injury concerns. Josh Dacos in a bit of doubt for this one. He'd be a massive loss if he's not out there on Friday night. And the Bombers, they really need to claim a scalp. Brad Scott said during the week that they just beat who they're up against at the moment, and the ladder's so close. But I think if they can beat Collingwood at the MCG on a Friday night, that's going to do a lot for their confidence heading into September, hopefully for them. But if they lose, that is going to cast more questions on them, and if they even make it to the finals. So, an absolute huge game. And I think Collingwood, just because the big game experience, the MCG, Friday night under lights, and Essendon just didn't handle it well last week. Obviously, those things went against them in the third quarter, but the bogey side, Geelong, just did it again to them. And Collingwood's had a pretty good record over the Bombers in recent times as well. So, I can see Collingwood getting up in this one, but it's going to be close, surely.
Yeah, it always is.
It's going to be under 10 points.
Well,
and I think Collingwood will do it again. They'll pull off another miracle comeback win, or might not be a comeback, but it's going to be close.
It always is with Collingwood. It's almost a guarantee that it's going to be a close game. Not good for us Collingwood supporters now, life expectancies. It has been for the last few years, but I think they get up as well in this one. I mean, as much as there's been a lot of chatter about the way Collingwood lost, and there were some glaring signs, particularly defensively. I don't think it's necessarily, curtains. And I don't think that they've lost their aura in any way. I think you look at Gold Coast's record at home, they have been just perfect. They haven't lost there all year. They've literally been perfect. I mean, going there and winning is not an easy thing for anybody. It's going to become, for a lot of teams that have to go and play Gold Coast up there, a really, really difficult task. If you don't get them on the road, you're going to be facing a much different sort of proposition.
You're probably going to lose.
Yeah. So, credit should be going more to the Suns in this way. Yes, there were some, poor performers, like Darcy Moore's been down in form. Collingwood haven't been playing well the past few weeks. But I think back at the G, back, in front of a big crowd, you expect that, with some players coming back, I mean, much they lose a few, they'll get Lockie Schultz back as well, which is big for them. I still think Collingwood will have too much in this game, with the pressure on, the big Friday night lights, as you mentioned. I mean, you get a sense that Nick Dacos will step up again. I mean, that goal he kicked in the last quarter last week was just unbelievable. He just continues to take his game to the next level. And I think he's looking good for 30+ in this one, even if he does get a tag, which we can expect. I mean, It seems like that's the formality now. Or as Damien Hardwick sort of put it, teams might have to implement 2 taggers now with Jordan Ngoe back in the team. So, but I think the Pies get up in this one against Essendon on Friday night. Saturday afternoon at Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne versus Gold Coast. Now, we spoke about the Suns being so good at home, but it's been the absolute reverse away from home. They haven't won a game out when they have been the away team. But if there's any week for them to turn it around, it surely has to be this weekend against North, who have been vastly improved over the last month. But Gold Coast, if they're going to be a team that's going to play finals this year, these are the games you've got to win.
Yeah, they can't be taken seriously if they lose this one. North have been a lot better in the last month, been very competitive and pushed teams a lot further than they have at the start of the season. So it is a lot trickier now for the Suns playing against them. If they had them 10 weeks ago, you just lock this in. Even the Suns' away record, you wouldn't even consider tipping North Melbourne. But yeah, they pushed the Bulldogs 3 goals last week, beat West Coast about a month ago, should have won that game against Collingwood when they were up by 54 points. So, like you mentioned, vastly improved. And this is not going to be a walk in the park for the Suns, even though they have to win it. And I think they will. They're going to get a lot of confidence out of beating Collingwood last week. Like that was probably one of the best wins in their history. Yeah. Just the monster was coming at them, and they were able to take them down. Like Collingwood's pressure in the last quarter was absolutely incredible. It seemed every time they were getting the ball inside 50, they were scoring. And when they got in front, you thought, "Oh, this is game over." Even the start of the last quarter, I thought, with Collingwood coming and their pressure, like no team is going to be able to withstand this, let alone the Suns, who don't have a lot of big game experience, but they did. So I think on the road, it's going to be a real challenge. So it might be 2 or 3 goals, but yeah, the Suns, like, just come on, be serious and win this game.
Yes.
And put yourself in finals contention, because if they lose, like, you can't really consider them to the finals.
No, I mean, they technically will still be in it, but I mean, it's just, we're really going to take them that seriously. No. Yes, you can beat teams at home, but there's every chance that they'd have to play a road elimination final. They might get there, but would they just be, going on the road and going out in the first round? They've got to get some wins on the road, because
they won't make finals if they don't win at least 1 or 2 on the road.
Absolutely. And you'd think, like, you spoke about the confidence coming out of beating Collingwood. I know this might sound, like a bit of an interesting sort of thought, but I think they get a lot of confidence just out of winning outside of Queensland as a road team. Not beating a team in Darwin as the home team. I'm talking about going as the proper away team, going somewhere, going to Victoria and getting a win, despite it being against a side that's only won 1 game all season, but going out there and winning, that will give them just a bucket load of confidence. It's just that relief that finally we've done it. We've got that sort of, we've been able to move past that little bit of a bogey. So I think they get up. It's not going to be easy. I think it's going to be scrappy. I think North Melbourne are going to make it really hard for them. I think Nick Lark is going to kick multiple goals in this game, but I think the Suns just get up. Over in Adelaide, at the same time, Port Adelaide against the Western Bulldogs. Big game for both these two sides. They both recorded wins. Port Adelaide, a much-needed win against St Kilda. It was not convincing at all, but you saw how much it meant to Ken Hinkley. Some really emotional scenes after the game. It was a big win for Port Adelaide in the sense of just taking a little bit of pressure off, but now back at home, I mean, they have to, show something at Adelaide Oval and give the fans something to really get excited about heading into the last couple months of the season.
I think they will. They'll be vastly improved on what they showed against the Lions 2 weeks ago. But I think the Bulldogs are starting to find some really good form. They're getting some players back. Their forward line's not as decimated as it was. Just the midfield group, Marcus Bontempelli, well, he's not on an injury cloud or an illness cloud this week, so maybe he might not have a super excellent game like he has. 3 times in the last 6 weeks, he's gone into a game, you're thinking, okay, is he going to pull out? Is he not? He had back soreness at that North Melbourne game last week. And, best on ground. Doesn't faze him at all. Maybe it's sort of like as tricky users or something. He's just backs against the wall. And, he's just the best player in the competition. Arguably at the moment. So, I think the midfield group's just going to be too strong. There's too much depth there. Obviously, Port's guns are really good, but I think it just falls away. You got Horn-Francis, Rosie, and Butters. They're all terrific, but, there's not much depth out of that. I think the Dogs do run a bit deeper in the midfield. So, I think the Bulldogs might get a really good win on the road and boost their chances of making the finals.
It's a tough one to pick because I think the Port are going to have to show something in this game and really going to have to, if they're going to be serious about playing finals this year, these are, again, the games you've got to win. You've got to win these games at home as well. As much as the Bulldogs have been much improved, they really should fancy their chances of getting something, especially you want to make Adelaide Oval a fortress, right? You don't want to be losing these sort of games at home. But I will go with the Bulldogs just in this game. I think it's a coin flip. I think it's, it really could go either way, but I think the Dogs get up by under 10 points, and I think Bontempelli looking good for another big game. I reckon, just put him permanently on a soreness sort of thing on the injury report every week. And then, just expect, we're not sure we're going to get from him. It's like he almost has a flu, like the Michael Jordan flu game every few weeks, it seems like. So, Bont's looking good again for a big one at Adelaide Oval. Now, this game on Saturday twilight, Geelong versus Hawthorn, is shaping up to be one of the games that are around. These two teams in history have always had some great games. Down at GMHBA Stadium, which is rare. We haven't seen these two teams play down there in, a very long time. It's a tough one. Hawthorn riding this incredible wave at the moment. Geelong getting that much-needed win last week. Can the Cats finally stop Hawthorn this week?
I think they can. They have a pretty good record against the Hawks, and they would have got a lot of confidence. Just a bit of relief just to get a win on the board and in convincing fashion as well. As we all know, they had a pretty rough 6-7 weeks or so. They dropped 6 out of 7 games. So the wheels really were starting to fall off. But, some of their better players found some nice form on Saturday night. And I think they can take that back down to GMHBA Stadium. And as you mentioned, Hawthorn have barely played down there. They had a game during COVID, 2020, no crowd. But apart from that, they haven't played down there since 2006. So first game with a crowd that the Hawks will play at GMHBA since 2006. So, most of those players at Hawthorn wouldn't have played down there at all.
Some would have been kids down when that game was happening, maybe 1 or 2 years old, Yeah,
babies.
Yes.
Actual babies. It's crazy. So, Hawthorn, just keep getting it done. You think, okay, they're due for a loss. I think we both tipped West Coast last week, which is just an absolute
real egg on our face
in hindsight, because Hawthorn straight out of the gates just embarrassed them. That should have been 100 points. They sprayed a lot of chances in that first quarter. The scoreboard just flattered West Coast. They were putrid. Hawthorn were excellent. They're just playing some great footy. Sam Mitchell's just got them humming. So, I've tipped against them so many times and I've had egg on my face, but I think it's just so hard to tip against Geelong at GMHBA Stadium. So, I'm going to go with the Cats to get it done.
This has all the hallmarks of a big Hawthorn win, doesn't it? A galvanising Hawthorn win on the road.
They can win this, they're probably playing finals.
Yeah, I think we've got to take them quite seriously. They're beyond just playing finals. I think we've got to start having, because they're 7-1, should be 8-0 since that, I think, 1-5 start that they had, or 1-6, I believe. Yeah. So they've just been unbelievable since the way they've started, since their really poor start to the year. And they really should be undefeated since that loss against Sydney. They should have won that game against Port Adelaide as well. But I do think this is probably a bridge too far. I mean, we could be coming back here with egg on our face about they've done it again. But I just think Geelong will get up at home. I mean, this is an old rivalry. They'll be galvanised with that win against Essendon. I think that they showed as well. I think the big thing that came out of it is life after Tom Hawkins, what it might look like. And they looked a lot more mobile going forward. And I mean, I just think Jeremy Cameron's in for a big one and looking good for multiple goals and a win for the Cats in this one as well. Saturday night, GWS against Carlton. I mean, we spoke about the Giants. Their season is really on the line after that loss against Adelaide last week. It's been a really poor run for them ever since their really promising starts this season. It feels like, I don't want to go too early because there's still a long way to go, but it feels like this season almost happening in inverse to last year, where
really
they
has,
started poorly last year, finished strongly. This year, it's almost the strong start with a bit of a barren run. Do you see them turning it around against the Blues this week?
I don't. There's no reason not to tip Carlton. They've been really good, and the Giants have just been, even at home, they've just been so disappointing. They lost against the Bulldogs there about a month and a bit ago. They lost against the Swans there. So, their home form doesn't do anything for them either. And they just haven't really showed any of the signs what they showed last season. They were terrific at the end of the last season. They looked like they were probably the best team in it coming into the finals. The footy they were playing was superb. But, yeah, Josh Kelly, another injury, another calf injury. So he's out. That's a massive blow. He was really crucial to what they were doing at the end of last season, and they'll be without him again for about a month. So, yeah, I think the Blues, they got a win up there last year, early in the season.
A controversial win at that as well.
Yes, it was, absolutely. Yes. And Toby Green just really needs to fire. I think this is probably his worst season he's had since maybe his first 1 or 2 seasons. It's really uncharacteristic from him to not have, I know he kicked 5 goals against Gold Coast and Gather Round, but apart from that, he's been really disappointing. And even Jesse Hogan, he's really gone off the ball as well. You said promising start to the season. They looked unbeatable at the start of the season. They were Premiership favourites. Everything was going right for them, and the wheels have just completely fallen off. And I think Carlton will get the job done up there.
You know what? I think this is the game that turns it around for me. I think I've said this a few times. I think it's coming. I think this is it. It has to be this week. If it's not this week, I just don't think it'll ever happen. You're at home. You got a chance to make a statement against one of the best teams in the competition. It's also a lot of pressure on Carlton to really, solidify themselves going on the road and getting another big win. I mean, they beat Port on the road a few weeks ago as well, which was a really it showed that next step because they hadn't won at Adelaide Oval in so long. But if they can come out and beat GWS, it will really solidify sort of their position for me. But I do think GWS are going to bounce back. I just get this sense that this rot that they're currently in, it just can't keep going on. They're too good. They've got too many good players to just be playing this poorly.
It's bizarre.
Yes, they've got injuries at the moment across the board, but you just get this sense that they'll turn it around. And I think it comes this week. I think they just get up over Carlton. And I think Tom Green for 25 plus in this one as well. But it's going to be such a good game. We've got a really good slate of games on Saturday. Some real nail biters. The other one on Saturday, which might not be too much of a nail biter right here, Fremantle against Richmond at Optus Stadium. Fremantle overwhelming favourites for this one, and rightfully so after that win against Sydney. Is it time to take Freo a little bit more seriously after that win against Sydney?
It probably is, but also they need to be more consistent. They've had some really poor games as well. They've had some great wins this season. That win up in Alice Springs against Melbourne, sensational, and then obviously beating Sydney at the SCG. Yeah. That is one of the great wins of the season for any club. So they need to be more consistent though. And there was Dockers supporters, fair enough. They've gone through 30 years without a premiership, and just okay, we're beating the Swans at the SCG. We're going to lose one on the way home that we shouldn't lose. Yeah. So surely this is not going to be one of them, but they need to come out and just destroy Richmond because the Tigers have been really poor this season. The season can't finish quick enough for Adam Uze in his first season. They showed some good signs for a few weeks there after that Gabba demolition by the Lions. But, 10 goals the last couple of weeks they've lost by. And, it should get ugly for them over there. And the Dockers just have to do a number on them. And if they can, win the next few games, the Dockers, we really do have to start taking them seriously because, as I've mentioned multiple times on this, their midfield, it's underrated because it's not a Victorian midfield. Yeah. But they're superb. The way they just went in hard against the Swans midfield, which is, arguably the best in the competition as well, they made them look silly on the weekend. Nat Fyfe did a bit of a tagging job. That worked really well. And, he's just buying into, I think for a while there, he still wanted to be the number one banana in the midfield and thought, okay, I'm still the man. I'm a 2-time Brownlow medalist. But I think he's just buying into more team footy now, and that's just paying off for them. So, Freo by a lot, I think.
Yeah, it has to be a a percentage boosting win for them. I mean, if they can get themselves and finish the year in third or fourth, it's still a great achievement because you're guaranteed a home final regardless, even if you lose that first final, and you put yourself in a position to at least make a prelim. And I think going into this season, we had doubts whether they'd actually play finals this year. There were doubts over the future of Justin Longmire, and they've been able to turn things around this season. And, you know, they've made the most of, you know, being able to get ahead in that sort of logjam for now. But if they can get a bit of percentage, it will just go such a long way to, you know, really solidifying themselves as one of those teams that could go deep into finals. And really, they shouldn't have any problems against Richmond. I think just too many injuries for the Tigers this year. As you said, I think they just want 2024 over and just reset for 2025, maybe with some nice draft picks in tow, a bit of, you know, maybe looking at some free agents or whatever might be around. But I think the Dockers get up and Jai Amos looking good for multiple goals in this game as well. Sunday afternoon, Melbourne against West Coast. Now, the D's, they really should win this game quite easily. They were up and about against Brisbane on Friday. They looked like
really well.
They started the game well, but they just ran out of gas in the last quarter. Brisbane ran over them in that last quarter, but they really shouldn't lose this game. This should be quite a comfortable win for them, even despite all their struggles over the last month and a bit.
Yeah, the Eagles, it's incredible thinking back. It's 7-8 weeks ago when West Coast beat Melbourne over at Optus Stadium and when they were playing some pretty good footy, but they're not anymore. That performance, that was as bad as, like, I know it was only 60 points, but that is bad as, like, a team's going to play. It definitely should have been 100 points, and they didn't fire a shot. Their midfield didn't look like they wanted to be there. Their forward line was just dysfunctional. I think they only took their first mark inside 50 in the last few minutes of the game, and Hawthorn had grabbed about 18 marks inside 50. So, yeah, Melbourne, they would have been really disappointed with losing that game. Their fitness is a concern. They haven't kicked a goal in the last two final quarters. They didn't score against North Melbourne, managed to hang on, but up against the Lions at the Gabba, they were overrun and they almost hang on. The Lions almost blew it. But, yeah, Melbourne should do this so comfortably. They need to get some percentage back, and I think they will. And, yeah, it could get ugly for the Eagles. They've been putrid on the road. They're bad at home again, so I can't see what they're going to do on the road.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is Harley Mania's first trip to the MCG.
Oh, it is.
Yes, I think it's his his debut at the G. So I think that sort of now becomes the storyline across the Nullarbor.
Yes,
Harley Mania arrives on the big stage. No, but I think Melbourne will be way too strong. They should win this game quite comfortably. It should be like almost a confidence game for them, just to show that they can, you know, get a bit of percentage, you know, get some wins on the board, find a bit of rhythm. And I think Cozzy Pickett looking good for multiple goals. He's been in some good form as of late, and I think they'll be too strong for the Eagles. Across town on Sunday afternoon, the Saints against the Swans. I mean, Sydney will be chomping at the bit to get back on the winners list against the Saints, who will be without Max King for the rest of the season. Just a hammer blow for them, what's already been such a disastrous year for them. I mean, Sydney really should win this game and get back on the winners list quite convincingly.
Yeah, another team that once the season ends, I think St Kilda are just wanting to load up on draft picks. Like, the talent, they just don't have enough talent. I think Ross Lyon recognised that probably in the last season when they were just blown away in that final. And, yeah, they just haven't looked like it this season, the Saints. And, yeah, as you mentioned, Max King, he's copping a bit of criticism for that performance. And, yeah, it's probably unfairly so after, he played out the game with that knee injury and he won't play again for the rest of the season. So, yeah, Sydney should rebound pretty strongly in this one. The midfield is just going to blow St Kilda's away. Swans have a pretty good record at Marvel Stadium and, yeah, there's not really too much to play for the Saints now. Can't play finals. They're having a bad old season. So, yeah, the Swans should get a bit of confidence up and, yeah, do it pretty easy. Yeah,
I think getting some games into the kids now is probably just the priority.
I mean,
just working out who's going to be there next year and who isn't. It's sort of that time of the year where teams sort of go into almost preservation mode a bit and start to shut down bodies, you know, start to look at, you know, what can that next generation produce? Who's going to get a contract next year? So I think that's all really St Kilda have to play for at the moment. Sydney, I mean, it's just, you know, getting back on the winners list, just doing it convincingly, and I think they will. Errol Gould looking good for 25 plus in this one as well. Final game of the round, Brisbane against Adelaide. A big win for Brisbane, a real important win. They were tested against Melbourne, but they were great in the last quarter. coming away with a win there against the Crows, who it was a good win against GWS. Finally, they really started to show something. It was a really impressive performance, but Brisbane going in overwhelming favourites to win this one at the Gabba. And really, despite Adelaide's improved performance, they should get the job done at the Gabba.
Yeah, for sure. Again, another two teams that played about 8 weeks ago, and it was a draw at the Adelaide Oval that time. But yeah, both teams are in different shape this time around. The Lions have put together some really good form since. They won their last 4, and yeah, at the Gabba, they should be too strong. Their midfield's just better than Adelaide's. There's still some holes there for the Crows. They don't run that deep. But yeah, they would have taken a lot of confidence out of beating GWS, who, yeah, they're not going that well. But just to get that win at home against the prelim finals from last year, and Tex Walker looked like he was up and about again, but Isaac Rankin, he has. I knew he was a really good player, but he's really surprised me with his endurance and being able to go in the midfield and create havoc in the midfield. I thought, okay, he's just a really smart small forward, but the way he's gone in there and boosted their midfield a bit, and like I mentioned, like they don't run that deep, but when he goes in there, they look at an entirely different prospect. He just gives them that buzz in there. So I think the Lions are just a better side. They have more to play for. The Crows are not going to play finals. The Lions are back in the top 8 for the first time all year. So if they can keep winning, there's still a chance of making the top 4. And at home, they should get this done. But I think the Crows will push them. They might give them a few scares.
I think, though, Brisbane really at home, starting to really hit that next level. And it's incredible to think the way they started this year that they're a real good chance to actually make the top 4. It just goes to show how even this competition is, how weird of a season it's been.
Such a weird season.
So I think the Lions get up quite easily in this one and solidify their place inside the top 8. But that's all we've got time for here on the Footy Frontline podcast. We'll be back next week to review all the round 17 action and look ahead to round 18, hopefully with a little less sort of discussion around umpires.
Hopefully no umpires next week.
Yes,
we'll leave that
fingers crossed that we're not going to be talking about umpiring decisions, but thank you again for joining me, Ollie.
Thanks, Nick.